Hey, Beverly, we can't hear you.
Hi, sorry.
There you are. Hey, all right. So this lecture now, anyway, here we are with four of us here in person. Joel and me and Tracy and Taria.
Oh, Taria.
Taria's here. There she is. See her?
Oh, hi, Taria.
Hi, Mariana.
Oh, I was trying to connect with a walk with her. It's been I'm going to get there yet because it would be a delight to take a walk. Yes.
Okay. Cool.
Well, and we'll admit anyone else who seems to come, who joins us. Hey, greetings and thank you for being here, and thanks for the opportunity to read these lectures and to be part of this wonderful process. You know, the guide says that things are difficult on Earth, which is why we're here on Earth, right? In other words, that in the spirit world, you see everything or you know everything and your perceptions are wide and you don't really need to focus on the negativity, or you can't do it as well there. So here on Earth, we are blessed to be kind of struggling through this muck, right? Through the swamp, which is the way we make progress. One thing that's very interesting about this lecture is that it really has a lot of explanation and justification for reincarnation. This concept of the residual, what does he call it? The residual, the reservoir. Just to talk about this first, the idea seems to be that, as we know, what the guide says is that our memories of previous lives are wiped when we get born. And the reason for that is the parable of the rich man. Because if I'm a rich man and I want to know what it's like to live in the slums and be poor, and if I go there, and if I give away all my possessions, and if I live like the poor, I'm still going to know I'm rich. So it really does not mold my soul substance. It doesn't really affect me because I don't have the experience of being poor. No matter how I change my material circumstances, I still remain, I know who I am. I know about my wealth. So that's why the guide says, that's why our memories, we can't remember anything about our previous lives. But it looks to me from this lecture that we can, our emotions are imprinted from previous lives. So the work that the guide says at one point here that most of what you experienced in childhood is left over from previous lives. And then the guy talks about the residual reservoir. You cannot go back further than this lifetime, but this lifetime is all you need. Your early pains in this life are essentially those you have suffered in previous lives. Your accumulated residual energy block not only attracts the same events over again, but makes you incapable of meeting new feeling experiences in a free and spiritually hygienic way. The new feeling that cannot live in you is added to your residual reservoir. On the other hand, once your residual reservoir is emptied and you have fully experienced the past accumulations, the flow of your being will deal with new pains in a very different way. So do we all get that? In other words, somewhere else in the lecture, the guide indicates that when we make emotional progress, and I assume that equates with spiritual progress, it carries over from one life to the next. So the guide talks a lot in this lecture about the residual reservoir. In other words, all kinds of built up feelings that haven't been purified because they haven't been faced. And once we face these feelings and we go through them, we experience the original feeling and then it dissipates. Once that happens, we clean up this residual reservoir and then we make things more possible in the next life. Make sense? Yeah. Now that I think is one of the very important insights of this lecture. All right, this lecture is called inner and outer experience. But I was just mentioning to Traci that I think they probably didn't name it correctly. An interesting thing, of course, is that the guide never gave names to the lectures. The names were added later by Eva, usually. And I think the lecture should have been called Fear, really, because it's really about fear, isn't it? Only the first two paragraphs are about this idea about inner and outer experience. And those things certainly is very commonplace. I mean, obviously, your inner experience can be very different from your outer experience. And two people sitting on a beautiful beach in paradise can experience it very differently. Someone who's done a lot of work and then comes home and rests and relaxes experiences that rest and relaxation in a very different way from somebody who's just been sitting around all day doing nothing. So the inner experience matters more than the outer experience. And I think that that's certainly very commonsensical, and certainly no one would disagree with that. Then the guide talks about fear. And I was kind of thinking, I do want to say one thing parenthetically before the discussion of fear. The guide introduces that by saying inner experience is possible only when you can feel. If feelings are blocked, no inner experience is possible. Lack of feelings deadens all of life and makes it impossible for you to fulfill yours. Now, I've always been a fairly intellectual kind of person, and whenever I was told to feel all my feelings, I got kind of annoyed with that. It's like, okay, I've got some feelings. I don't really want to be told to feel all my feelings. Didn't really kind of know exactly what that meant. When I was a teenager, I liked certain feelings. I didn't like others. But I think when you're young, it's different than when you're older. And when you're older, you feel the pain and debility that comes with being older. You feel the insecurity of being older. Mysterious, right? But you don't feel that when you're young. At least I didn't. When you're young, you feel more or less invincible, invulnerable. But this paragraph here, and it's interesting because this lecture was given in 1971, and John and Eva Perakos married in, I think, 1972. And bioenergetics, what's now called core energetics, is the body work. And drum roll, please. The way you feel things is in your body. And when I first got introduced to bioenergetics, courtesy of this lovely lady named Adrienne Winogrand, who was a Pathwork helper and bioenergetic therapist at the time, and I was in 11th grade, it helped me to feel a lot of feelings that I didn't know I had. And I certainly experienced that with John Perakos also in his workshops, where it's like, okay, you're there, everything is normal, and then you get bent over the back of one of those bioenergetic stools, and then he starts pounding on your chest and telling you to scream, and then you start screaming, and then this terrific rage that can move the world all of a sudden erupts. And that was a really revelation to me. So that's why this paragraph, I think, is why the Pathwork embraced bioenergetics. Because how can you separate feelings from the body, right? And to digress, when Moira Shaw came in with what was called the keys and what's now called the 50-50 work, that rejected the body side of it. It's more cerebral. So this third paragraph on page 1 talks about, to savor your life in its fullest, you must eliminate your defenses against feelings. You must go through your fear of the unpleasurable, painful feelings. That which is feared must be accepted, experienced as it is at this moment. And most importantly, when you fear a feeling, you block the experience, you anesthetize yourself. Numbing and denying often seems the only protection against unbearable pain and suffering. Well, that's what Alexander Lowen and Baracus called body armoring, what Wilhelm Reich called body armoring, the armoring against feelings, where everyone is rigid and unable to feel things, and why, fascists can kill millions of people. Right, as Stalin said, one person dying is a tragedy, a million dying is a statistic. So the guide talks about, that's kind of the, what's the word? The tragedy of modernity, where, the crisis of modernity, I should say. On page 4, here goes. When fear of your feelings induces you to block off your capacity to feel, the impoverishment creates the need for a substitution. The mind, this is the thing, the mind then becomes this substitution. In order not to feel your deadness, the impoverishment of your inner being, and to have a sense of existing, you use your outer mind much more than is natural. If you cannot exist through your flowing, feeling being, your intellect and will take almost exclusive charge of your deadened feeling part. They temporarily give you the illusion of being alive. Now that's the crisis of modernity, right? Where people don't feel anything. And we can do all the bullshit that we're doing because we just don't care, right? And we've deadened ourselves, we've hardened ourselves. Okay. So later on in this lecture, the guide talks about 4 specific kinds of feelings and how we defend against those feelings. And those 4 particular feelings, I believe, are sadness, right? Then there's pain and loneliness, and there's anger. And what's the other one? Despair?
I think so.
Oh, yeah, there's fear. Well, okay, yeah. Oh, no, I'm sorry. The feeling of fear itself. Fear, anger, despair and loneliness, and sadness. About how we defend against those, mostly because when we reject those feelings, we feel like I should not have those feelings. We want to push those feelings underground. And so therefore, we can't feel whatever originally made us angry or pained us or made us feel despair or lonely. And the more we can't feel it, then we add to this residual reservoir of things that are hidden. All right, so that is, that's my summary of this lecture. At least some of the main points that I think are in the lecture. And Traci and I were speaking about that when you read the lecture, sometimes it feels like you're reading a totally different lecture. You can read a lecture once, then you read it again, it's different. I remember when I was a kid, there was some rock band that put out a record that when you started to play it on one side, you could get 2 tracks. Depending on where you put the needle, you either got one set of 5 songs or a different set, but it was on the same side. So reminds me a little bit of what Traci and I were talking about how you read the lecture and then you say, what the hell, I thought I read this, right? Right, Kevin? Yeah.
This one in particular. I mean, they're all like that, but this one really in particular seemed.
Yeah, so let's all talk about this. And Traci was talking about an experience of fear that she had and what that was about. Yeah. Yeah.
I was saying one thing about the lecture is that it says that if you just experience the fear, experience a thing that you're afraid of, it's never going to be anywhere as bad as the fear of having it. And I was telling him that one thing I always was afraid of was something happening to Chad or Kira. And then when Chad was almost killed in Turks 3.5 years ago, I spent 6 hours one night believing he was dead. And I was shocked at how okay I was. And I thought it would be the end of me. I used to say, oh, if something happens to Chad or Kira, I mean, that's it for me, you know. And I was like, I mean, I wasn't a happy camper, but I was okay. And I was so surprised at that. And I thought about this today because I've read this lecture now 4 times in the last couple of weeks. And each time I've read it, I'm having the experience that Alan said, which is, God, it's like I'm reading it for the, you know, and I probably read this lecture 20 times altogether, but 4 times in the last couple of weeks. But I was thinking about that experience with Chad because I really was, because I believed he was dead because he was, you know, he wasn't dead obviously, but he had been in a very serious car accident and he was unable to call me. And so I had the experience that he was dead, and I let Joel sleep. I mean, I remember it so clear because I didn't wake up Joel, and I wanted him to be able to have a good night's sleep because I thought he would be dealing with trying to get Chad's body back into the United States the next day. So I was already like figuring out, you know, how we were going to get his body back and how I was going to, you know, tell his sister, in particular his sister, and you know, really living as if I had, because I was so sure that he was dead because he had never ever before not, you know, he didn't come home, and he never did that before. When he doesn't come home, or even if he's going to be late, he's the type of kid, well, he's a man now who's very considerate, and he'll just text us, hey, I'm running late, I won't be back, you know, whatever. He just lets me know, and he didn't. And so I hung on to some hope that maybe he was just so badly injured that he couldn't call me or text me, which is in fact what happened. But it was such a slim hope because he was with his cousin, and the odds that both of them would have been killed, you know, somehow, because they weren't driving, and they walked to town. And the reason that they were in a car accident is because when they were walking home, one of the guests at the place where we live in the wintertime just pulled up alongside of him and said, hey, you know, hop in and I'll give you, know, it would have been a 30-second car ride down the road. He would have been home. And then the man took a wrong turn and he ended up driving the car into the wall. And so I kept, you know, the odds that both of them were so injured that neither one could respond to my calls or texts or call me, or that the hospital would, you know, as the hours went on during the night, because you know, I didn't get the phone call until 6:30 in the morning. So as the hours went by, I became more convinced, you know, that he was gone, and I was just dealing with it, you know. And I remember thinking even then, wow, you feared this your whole life, and you're not gonna, this isn't gonna be the end for you. I could see that I was going to be able to survive it. I mean, obviously, you know, not happy, but I knew I would survive it. And I was very surprised at it because I had really thought for all my life up until that point that if something had happened to them, I would not have been. I always thought I can survive anything, but if something happens to Chad or Kira, that's it, I'm done. And that wasn't the case. So that's what you were talking about that you wanted me to say?
Mm-hmm. Well, we should meditate on our fears and talk about them.
I want to say thank you to you, Traci, for sharing that. Thank you. I think it was a little brave of you to renew it again, to relive it.
Yeah, thank you.
Yes. Yes, I agree. Thank you so much for sharing that and letting me in, let all of us into that. Yes.
Is there a difference between fear and anxiety?
I think so, right?
I think in the lecture, the guide says that fear underlies anxiety. And if you feel anxiety, there's a fear underneath it that you have to uncover and discover what it is. Does fear of the dentist count?
Yes, yes.
That was your example, but Alan was saying, yeah, he's always afraid to go to the dentist. Not afraid, but you know, and then when he gets there, it's never that bad, you know, especially these days with the Novocaine, you know, whatever they do to you it's not really that. I mean, nobody likes it, but it's not really that bad, you know? So,
Well, sometimes it is.
it's not that bad.
No, but it's, I'm trying to parse the understanding of fear, like, my mother has a similar fear to Tracy. Like, I'm 65 years old, almost.
Well, she lost a child.
She lost a child. That's correct. Right. That's right. And when you do lose a child, obviously you're more protective of the other ones that are still alive. Yeah. So, I mean, that's amusing because we were at her attorney's, and she was writing her will. And the lawyer says, well, what if your son predeceases you? And she says, well, if he predeceases me, it will be by about
2 seconds.
Will be by about half an hour.
Yeah. That's probably true. That's probably true.
You didn't know you were that important.
Right.
But it's probably.
And then I said to her last night, I said, well, Mom, if I go out to the grocery store and I don't come back for 2 hours, what do you feel? Well, I'm terrified then. But she knows, you see, my mom was a senior Pathwork helper, and she actually edited all the lectures with my dad. She knows how irrational that is. And all I have to tell her is, hey, Mom, makes no sense. She goes, you're right. But as the guide always says, the feelings are more powerful than the intellect. And these things live, don't they? They live in you. Your fears and your compulsions. Maybe cleaning out this residual reservoir is a little bit more difficult than it may appear from reading the lecture. Yeah.
Yeah, one thing that I'm thinking here is what we do not to feel is leave the body, because the feelings are in the body. And what we do is we go to the mind, as it says, and we are literally not in the body. Our consciousness is somewhere out here. And part of the core energetics work is start by grounding yourself. It's bringing your energy down to the earth, to the body, is being in the body, so that you can know what you're feeling. And sometimes you start by sensations. You don't even know what to call that. You say, wow, I feel something in the stomach, my hands are sweaty, I feel, I sense this and that, and you don't even know this is fear.
Yeah.
You cannot call it by the name.
Yeah.
So grounding is essential.
Right. I think that's undeniable.
Yeah.
That people have a lot of things that they're hiding, or it's this idea of armoring, that in some sense the feelings are calcified in the body, hardened in the body, to the point where you don't even know what they are any longer. I think that's undeniable.
It was also a good protection for me to go into my head. I left the body, and I could tell that because when I went through puberty, I really didn't even have a bad time or anything. I had no connection to my body, but I did go into books, and it was my salvation. So I just want to give a little call out, a shout out to the fact that the mind can help us to get through. It can be helpful. Then we have to stop it. Then we have to go back.
Yeah,
do it again.
The guide says on page 3, pleasure and creativity can thrive only in a state of relaxation. And I said, hey, wait a second. I have gotten a lot of pleasure and creativity when I wasn't relaxed. Like when you're really trying to get something done, like a project, and you're really tense, but you get it done and you feel good about that. So I said, maybe the key word here is thrive. Maybe pleasure and creativity can exist if you're not relaxed, but it's better if you are relaxed. It's a thought. You live in a constant state of guardedness unbeknownst to your conscious mind. Therefore, the first task on your path is to explore yourself deeply so that you become conscious of your defenses. Yeah, that's certainly the path of self-facing. Yeah. And then the guy goes on, only then can you explore the next question. What is it precisely that you guard against? In the last analysis, it is always a pain that you have suffered. I mean, I do recognize in myself this continuous feel of guardedness, right? And I think that's why people like to um, let down, lay back with their friends, have a good time, you know, drink, go out. They want to give up the guardedness, which is such a burden, really, isn't it? And doesn't it make sense, the concept that the guardedness exists because you're afraid of your lower self, or you're afraid what might be inside, what you might express? If you weren't afraid of anything within, would you still be guarded?
No.
Joel, do you want to say something or? Yeah, go ahead.
Hi, everybody. Kevin, welcome
Joel.
back. It's so good to see you. And Marion, there you are. So I was just thinking, I was been working with different fears. Fear is something that was very strong force in my life, throughout my life. But most recently, I don't remember if it was directly when I first started to read the lecture, if it was before, but I give you an example. We have a large lab mix, and she's afraid of other dogs. So if she sees another dog, she becomes quite aggressive, although she's very good with people and babies and everything else. And I was very nervous about these encounters, which are inevitable in New York City. So I tried to see, what was it that I was afraid of, and I realized that besides, it's unlikely that she's going to hurt another dog, because even if she explodes, I'm strong enough to restrain her, and I stay away from these encounters as best I can, which I'm usually able to do. But I realized that what I was really afraid of is that if she were to hurt another dog, that maybe the owner of the other dog might demand that I have the dog put to sleep. So what was really underlying the fear was the loss of my companion. And so, but so I really needed to keep going through different layers, to say, what it's not so much that I'm afraid that she's going to hurt another dog. That's unlikely. It's I'm afraid of the loss, right? And what she represents, even though I know it's at this point that she's now 10, it's more likely that she will go before I do, and that I will have to accept her passing at some point. But I guess it's the idea of it being enforced on me, and because I have lost other dogs. So anyway, I guess my point is that I think that with the fear, another example, I was always afraid to swim in the lake. We have a place on the lake, and especially if it was dark or raining. I noticed, as I've been working with this for some years, I didn't want to open my eyes in the water, right? And so I said, well, what is it that you're afraid of, And so I would just let myself feel the fear, and I would say, well, I'm afraid of being eaten by a shark. So I said, okay, I'll just let the shark eat you. It's okay. Just I don't believe that I'm going to suffer that long. I'll leave my body. Even though, yeah, sharks aren't in the lake. not any of the ones that swim in the water. There are plenty of sharks around, but they're the two-legged ones. I'm not so worried about those. Or then it was, I had other images, that maybe an animal was going to bite me that was swimming in the water. So I just let myself feel that, and imagine that all these animals in the water were biting me. And so gradually, over some time, I've become more comfortable, and I've been able to go in the water on a cloudy day where the water is dark. I didn't force myself to open my eyes. I just gradually would open my eyes to get accustomed to the darkness. And I well, what is that fear, right? And I think that's fear of the darkness, fear of the unknown, fear of death, You know, what's going to happen to me when I die? Am I going to be able to see? Am I going to see evil? You know, my own hatred manifest in the form of demons that are coming at me, and I'm going to, you know, I don't know, they're going to get me. I'm going to die when I'm already dead. Um, so just to kind of explore, to keep exploring it gradually. There's a thing in psychology called progressive desensitization, where you look at what you're afraid of. So let's say you're afraid to go in the movie theater for whatever reason. So you gradually, you take yourself to the theater to the point where you're comfortable. And then if you, let's say it's just being in the lobby, right? And you're afraid to go beyond the lobby. So you go to the lobby in your mind. And then you leave. You give yourself permission to leave when it becomes too overwhelming. And then you go a little farther. Maybe you get down the hallway towards the seats, and you just gradually work towards it. And so I would do that with the fear, put myself in those situations. So I guess what I'm saying with long-winded explanation, that there are these different layers, and what seems to be the fear at first, it may be that might be, that's part of it, and then there are other levels, other aspects, and so that to stay with the feeling until it's too uncomfortable, then leave it. You know, go back to a safe place, and then revisit it some other time and try to go a little farther down into the darkness, and then event. So now I can go into the lake when it's cloudy. I can open my eyes. I'm still not I'm still not quite ready to be swimming through the weeds, but we'll see.
Well, did you understand what the fear meant of being in the lake?
I think it's a fear of death. I think in a way it's the fear of the unknown of death, the unknown aspect of death. That I don't believe I'm going to die. I believe I'm going to the other side, and everything's going to be okay. But I think I'm afraid of that phase that I've read about, where all of our hatred and negativity and bad acts manifest themselves and present themselves when we're in the transition, and what that's going to be like. Am I going to survive that? And am I going to get so caught up in the experience of that I'm not going to take advantage of the opportunity that I've been taught that presents, which is we can become enlightened.
Well, that's interesting. I mean, is that Pathwork doctrine?
No,
No.
so that's all from mostly from Buddhism.
Yeah, because the Pathwork doesn't say that we're presented with negative aspects after we die. The Pathwork actually says kind of sort of the opposite, which is that we become enlightened and happy because we realize our true nature, and we're not able to really get as in as close touch with our negative aspects. Well, because in other words, it's like the sun and the moon. In other words, you can't see the moon when the sun is up, and
Oh, okay. So
in other words, the negativity is
major.
there, but doesn't matter because the sun is up.
Oh,
The
I
moon-
hope that's
The
true.
moon symbolizes the negative, right? But it's obscured by the brilliance of the sun. That's the spiritual
Okay.
state. That's why we're here on Earth. We're here on Earth metaphorically. It's nighttime, and the moon, the negativity, is shining brightly, and we can see it and we can feel it. I think that's a good metaphor. At least I
Okay,
just
that's
thought of
nice.
that.
That's very reassuring. I never read
Yeah,
that.
so don't
but
worry,
I-
man. All that negative stuff's not gonna happen. It's
How are your dreams, Joel? I mean, do you have any nightmares in the sense of the darkness, or do you wake sensing any of those
I
things?
will have dreams where I'm being chased, although that seems to be less. I'm less upset if that happened so recently, last year or so. I mean, I have anxiety dreams. I don't have death dreams, or where I'm a victim of violence. It doesn't get to that
Right.
point.
Or any dark spiritual things or anything like
No,
that?
I don't
Like,
see any demons or any of that
okay.
stuff. No, if I do, I blocked it out.
Which is possible, of course, but yeah, I'm just wondering how you experience it, because that's usually a gateway sometimes to some of those similar fears the darkness or of feeling enveloped in something, because a lot of it is just straight projection, right? So
It's funny.
in the dream state.
I had a dream recently where I couldn't breathe, and I was with this spiritual being, and she said she couldn't breathe either. It was okay. And then it lasted a couple of minutes, and then I was okay, and I'm still not exactly sure what the message was. So it was, in a way, it was almost an experience of death, that maybe you stop breathing, right? And then, but that it was okay, um, that I wouldn't be alone in death, um, and that the feeling of not being able to breathe was, it was okay.
Yeah.
I mean, I was able to breathe. I didn't die, or at least in the dream, I didn't die and stop breathing. I got back to breathing, but I
Well,
think,
it's peeling some of those layers off, right? I mean, even that is kind of a reassurance right there from
yeah,
another part of you or a guide or something that
that's
you're,
that's the way that I took it, and
yeah.
it's kind of the reminder that there isn't any death, that our spirit lives on.
Yeah,
How
that's
about
what I took from this lecture was the reminders. It seems like when I read this lecture, it was a great wake-up call to just stay as much as you can present, to stay in the memory, to learn to savor those feelings, right? Because like Alan was saying, it's so easy, at least I feel very much so in my life with how busy it can be, or even just the way that you've kind of maintained you, or I've maintained myself in my life. i- it's a comfortable life emotionally, right? I'm not living on the edge emotionally every day, or feeling those things, and in a sense, by creating a comfortable life, I've enabled, in a sense, to numb some of the areas that that I was evading in a way that I would not want to see, or that I just didn't have any purpose to see. Let's say at my conscious level.
you're saying
Um,
that you have a comfort zone?
yeah, you're
Mhm.
right, exactly. And this lecture wakes me up from my comfort zone. This lecture screams, savor, and I think what was the other word that was at the end of the metabolism, right? It says that the full experience of your feeling self, right? And then it talks about it is the metabolism of your total organism, and that just that image just boom, it like hit me. I'm like, wow, your metabolism. I mean, that's literally like the fabric of how you're experiencing life. So it really, and it goes back to what Patricia, I think, was also saying about, at least when I heard that, it was about sensation more than even conceptualizing what I'm feeling. It's just stop conceptualizing it, stop guessing it, just feel it. Don't put a word in there, just feel it. And if you want to scream, scream. If you want to cry, cry. Whatever is going to happen in that sensation is going to happen. And then you'll go, oh yeah, wow, holy crap, that was in there, like that's kind of like, wow, that's a wake-up call for me when I read that.
Yeah, you even kind of feel the guide smiling a little bit when you read this sentence here. Um, Most people are motivated to start spiritual work like this because what they really seek are better ways to avoid the undesirable
Right.
feelings.
Yeah.
That was so good.
When it finally dawns on them that exactly the opposite direction must be taken, many leave the path,
Right.
unwilling to accept the truth that avoidance is futile. They insist on their illusion.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I have to just tell you that when Pathwork came into my life, that was like a big club that hit me over the head because, and I'm not saying you have to do this, but the teachings that I was using prior were specifically informed by me in that way, and that was a big illusion of mine. And it's still, I have to fight against it. I have to remind myself that, because I tether myself to the understanding of something and thinking that understanding it is really truly understanding it, but it isn't. It's just an intellectual game at
Yeah.
first for me, you know.
So there are different kinds of fears, right, that we have. The fear of feeling bad, that's a fear. Um, when you get older, things happen that shouldn't happen. Like you have like a hypertensive crisis, you start hyperventilating. All of a sudden, you don't feel so well. And it's frightening not to feel so well. And my feeling about that is what that means for me is I have a demand that I have to always feel good. I don't want to accept life, that life has pain and pleasure, discomfort and comfort, right? So it's my demand. I think at the back of many of these feelings is the demand that it shouldn't be that way, right?
Yeah.
So, you see all these fantasies of immortality and fiction. You want to insert your memory engrams into a robotic intelligence so that you can continue enjoying the universe, but you don't have to feel any pain. It's like the anger that pain exists. I can certainly relate to that. Like, why should I feel bad? Why should I
Suffer.
why should I suffer? Right, the fear of suffering, anticipatory fear. Like if you have a knee injury, right, Tracy? It's like you're afraid of it feeling worse. Maybe you're going to step the wrong way. It's going to even feel worse than it feels now. That's a fear, but maybe underneath that is the demand. I shouldn't experience any pain that I'm not comfortable with. That's a kind of amusing way to put it, right?
Right.
It's like in anger, like you want to rule. You do not like the fact that things happen that you do not approve of. So let's share some of our fears, ladies and gentlemen, if we like.
Fear of what other people are thinking. Okay. That's primarily ever since I was a young boy. I must have told many of you about somewhat intense bullying that I experienced, but not to position it specifically that that was the cause, but that certainly initiated a response in me to see what I was carrying forth from a prior life. Okay, that emotional response of being so disturbed and defensive about what someone else's reaction is to me, okay, what my image is. And that has been consistent throughout life after that, that I could see that. But when you, what the greatest, for me, the greatest recognition to not blame it on those incidences, but rather see those incidences as a way to kind of pinpoint items was raising my son, because my daughter has a kind of a similar response to me about, preserving her image and having other people see her a certain way and what they think. But my son has no cares in the world, okay, about that. He will literally do anything anywhere and have no concern about how he's thought of. Okay. And it's so liberating to have seen evidence directly to my face that two children can experience the same incoming thing, action, and yet completely, one it bothers and one it doesn't at all. And one can make a mountain out of it, and one can completely, it just goes shoo, right past them. And you're like, wow, how are you able to not be bothered by that? But yeah, that was fabulous when I saw that. And just since I'm talking about it, there's that part in here that says current psychology often says that a child is incapable of reacting differently to pain than by building its numbing defenses. This is true only, it says, when in previous lives residual pain was not experienced fully and thus eliminated. To the degree that a human being has done this, even in childhood, the severest of circumstances will be experienced in an undefended way. And that's wow.
Yeah, very deep.
That's
I mean,
wow. That's just so amazing.
What you described, about the differences between your children is one of the big cases for reincarnation.
Yeah.
How is it
Yeah.
possible that people who raised in the same way are so markedly different in some of their, psychological traits or the burdens that they carry?
Yeah.
That's something that is impossible, I think, to explain, really. I mean, or the best explanation I can think of is the explanation of reincarnation. what the
Yeah.
soul has experienced before this life.
Yeah.
So Beverly, tell me your deepest and darkest fears.
Well, besides things like mice and things like that, I think loss and humiliation, those two are pretty unpleasant.
Mm.
What kinds
And
of things, ask her what kinds of things, what kinds of things would
You want to sit here?
Yeah,
humiliate you?
Tracy.
What would you find humiliating?
Tracy says.
I think being wrong a lot, being like screwing up.
Okay, so that's fear of making a mistake.
Yeah, I don't like doing that.
Coming back.
Why don't you sit in your
Give you a big thumbs up there, Bev.
Yeah,
Yeah, I don't like that.
Give you a big thumbs up. I'm with you there.
yeah.
Sure.
No, I
That's embarrassing.
that's funny because you went in an area in a direction I didn't think you were going, because there's a lot of ways a person can be humiliated, but yours more is about fear of what people would think if you made a mistake, right, Beverly? And I had a woman that I used to work with at Pfizer. She was so afraid of making mistakes that she could not make a decision. She just
Hmm.
even on the, so she and I was her boss, and she just kept coming in, and until finally I would have to make it for her, because it was clear after many times in where she was coming at the decision from this angle that she wasn't going to be able to make it. And then over the years, I mean, I worked with her for over 20 years. I knew that she couldn't do that, but it was such a fear. And I've always thought about, what must have, how much, why would a person be so afraid to make, because like I'm the opposite. Now see, I've made so many mistakes in my life. It's just like, oh, what, I mean, I'm like your son in some ways when it comes to that. It's like, oh, I messed up again. Okay, how many more times today? I mean, there's not a single day in my entire life that I haven't made multiple mistakes. And okay, so it means nothing to me, really. I mean, it's just like, well, just try to learn. I mean, I hear a little, just try to, not make the same mistake again and stuff like that. Plenty of times I do, but yeah. So, but the fears, so the different fears, like as I already said, my fears that I would be annihilated if something happened to Chad or Kira. That was just something that I felt would do me in. That I would not be able to survive that. But then other things like I'm like your son with like, I don't care what people think about me. It's like, whatever, you think I'm good, you think I'm bad, you think I'm nice, you think, it just none of that stuff bothers me. So, but I've been paralyzed. It's much better now since I experienced the belief that he had died, and he almost did die. That fear has been, significantly made less. But I remember before I went through that if I didn't know where they were. I mean, Joel always jokes about it when he comes over, and he'll say, "Oh, your mother when you and Kira, when you and your sister were little, if we took them to the playground or something and they got out of my sight, I'd go just like a mad woman screaming through the, if I cared about what anybody thought about me, that would have been the time to worry, because I probably looked like an absolute mad woman running through the playground screaming for my children."
Yeah.
And Joel says, well, you must have lost, maybe you lost in a previous life, you lost a lot of children or something like that. But I don't know, I don't know why I was so afraid of that. And I'm still afraid of it because, I mean, it's still, but by orders of magnitude less. But I'm back to Beverly. So do you remember like when you were little or something, if you made a mistake, did you get punished?
Well, I remember my therapist made the connection that my baby brother was autistic and I was responsible for him. So I was just like 3 years older than he was. So I always had the great fear that if I didn't take excellent care of him, he could die because he would do out of control things.
Oh, well, that explains it. That explains that fear. I finally talked to Valerie. This is the woman that I referred to earlier, and she said that if she made any kind of mistake when she was a little bit, her mother would just like, blast her, emotionally, and she'd be punished for the, if she spilled her milk, it would be cause for like beatings and no TV that night, go into your room. I mean, for any little thing that kids do all the time. I mean, kids, pee in their bed, they spill their milk, they don't get good grades. That's just, she was unmercifully punished by her mother. So she actually developed, and it took me many, many years to figure, she just developed this, she just couldn't make a decision. I mean, it was so extreme. I remember once I told her to order a birthday cake for one of the members of our group. It was their birthday, and we were going to have her birthday was on the team, because we had our team meetings every 2 weeks. We had, we all got together and we would go over all the different litigations that we were working on. And it was one of the other members of the group birthday. She could not decide. She would, and she never did. She would not decide what kind of a birthday cake to get. She kept saying, "What do you want?" It's like, I don't care. Well, should I get vanilla? Should I get? She couldn't. She never did. She could not make that decision of what kind of birthday cake to get. So it was very profound in her. And
I think, Beverly, it might have been hard for you to have a brother that was autistic. I'm thinking of my brother as well, who was not the brightest bulb on the block. Could that be a part of the embarrassment too? I don't know.
Maybe. I mean, he would do some wild things, but the biggest thing was I was responsible for him, for his life. I mean, like, he would run in the middle of the street. I'll never forget one time he ran in the middle of the street and was having a temper tantrum right in the middle of the street. And my older brother and I had to stop traffic to make sure he didn't get hit and to drag him back. And like, I was like maybe 10 and my older brother was like 13. And so he would do things like that. And my parents were working and we had the responsibility. So if we make a mistake, the consequences were unbelievably dire, unthinkably dire. So no, I mean, I don't feel like decisions at work are like that dire, but I just really, like, I can make a decision, but I can work, but if it's something like taking the damn vaccine, I'm always afraid of making the wrong decision. But eventually I make a decision. I mean, I can do it, but I'm never always confident that it's the right one. So.
Can I ask a question?
Go ahead, Joel.
Beverly, were you punished if your brother did something that caused a problem for your parents, but it was not your older brother's or your fault?
No, I think the fear was in me rather than in my parents.
What was the underlying fear? That he would
get hurt.
That he would die?
He would get hurt and die. Yeah.
That he would get killed.
Yeah.
On your
running into the middle of the street.
Yeah, on your watch. So there were more incidents than just the one with the running into the street.
Mm-hmm.
And you were taking him out of the house where it was more difficult to control what was going on.
Yeah.
And how long did you have that responsibility for him?
Until he was about 13 and I was about maybe 16 or 17. That's when he was completely out of control and my parents finally had to put him in an institution.
Wow. And did you blame yourself for that?
I don't know. I always feel really sad to think about him going into the institution because a lot of bad things happened there. He was in, when Letchworth Village, I don't know if you remember what happened. No, at, what's the other place?
Creedmoor?
No, not Creedmoor. There was some place where Geraldo Rivera did the expose.
I remember that. I remember.
It was Willowbrook.
Right, Willowbrook.
Yeah, my brother got hurt really badly. He was in a place called Letchworth Village. And I won't tell you what happened to him, but he was really badly injured. And without going into great detail, what happened was my mother, who's like cried a lot, I had to take my brother and put him inside the institution. And I always felt guilty. I always felt like he would look at me and say, well, how could you leave me in this place? But I had to be the one to bring him in because my mother couldn't do it.
Oh boy.
There's just like a lot of stuff connected to that because he was like my son in a way, even though I was only 3 years older. He was my responsibility, and a lot of bad things happened to him.
Is he alive now?
No, he died. Everybody in my family except for one brother has died.
Yeah, just like me, I had a brother who died too.
That's an awful lot for a child to have to take on, Beverly.
Yeah.
Yes, this is Mary, and I wanted to comment on that too, because I realize, I mean, there's no hard and fast rule, and obviously you have your karma and all that. However, developmentally, 10 years old, having that responsibility is far too young, because your images are not, you're not set yet, all your misconceptions and all that stuff. What helps you develop an ego isn't there yet. It's not mature enough. So it takes a lot of self-love and compassion for yourself, which I feel is what you're doing. That's what you're doing. Self-love. Yeah.
Well, and I think too, to add to that, Marion, is to remember that if we believe that we have a contract on the other side, as the Pathwork says, that we have a mission in this life, that that the soul is immutable and untouchable, our God self, our higher self, that your brother took on that role for his highest good, and for the family, and so Sunday and Wednesday, Rigsby, Jan will often remind us, which is a hard pill to swallow, is that we came for the difficulty. That it's out of the difficulty and the suffering that we have the opportunities to grow.
Yes, I guess that's not what I'm addressing. I understand all of that.
Yeah.
What I'm addressing is the individualized self sphere, of which is the psychological sphere, which is also spiritual, is that is too young. So it's not talking about the karma, the paybacks, any of that. This is a grounding. That's a grounding concept of, not the only one. We have all of them. But it's very grounding to know what is appropriate and what is not on this sphere of the psychological. Very important. Does not address the karma, who came for what, and what their spirit decided and all that. I'm addressing that only because that's part of the healing, is to go back and look at our needs, which were not met, so that we can ask now, how do I get this need met now? So we have to, go back into the human psychological sphere to see what needs were not met when we were children.
Okay. So I was, can I ask to recap, Beverly, now tell me the fears you had again. You said the fear of humiliation. Is that right?
Loss and humiliation.
Loss and humiliation. Isn't it so, though, that behind so many of these fears, there's the idea that I must not, the guy says, I must not have loss. I must not be humiliated. I am going to fight against it, defend against that, instead of going through the pain. And then when you feel the pain of loss or humiliation, all of a sudden, he says, the acceptance of pain makes the pain pleasure. Yeah.
Pleasure?
That's what he says.
Yeah, no, I think you're onto something, because when I was working with Jan Rigsby about my fear, she said that exactly what you're just saying, Ellen, that behind that was a demand that my children should not die before me, that I should not have to experience that loss, that they have to experience it. They have to experience my loss. I have to die first. That it's, it would be unfair to have that, to have it, so that I'm the one who has to bury them. I'm the one who has to experience the loss, but it's okay if, they have to, experience the loss of their mother. And so that's true, and so once, with working with Jan and then experiencing, it started to, as Miriam would say, I love her word, pixelate, this tight knot that I'd lived with ever since I, had them, then started to become, less solidified. But you're right. I mean, I'm starting to babble, but it's behind the fear is a demand. I shouldn't be humiliated. I shouldn't have to feel those intense feelings of pain and sorrow of losing a child. I shouldn't have to, you know, have experience loss. I shouldn't have to, whatever you're, you know, it's some, that life shouldn't do, you know, that I'm not supposed to suffer, when we all know that we are going to suffer, that's part of the deal. It's, you know, life is about both. It's not.
Yeah. I mean, that's one of the big, Tracy was saying earlier that there are 5 or 6 or 7 things in every single lecture. And if you go through every lecture, you can find those things, those key points.
Pathwork tenets or whatever.
It's so interesting because, like, we don't want to accept reality.
No.
We want to run the show.
Right.
We don't want to believe we are not in control of everything. That's the ego.
Right.
And you know, a corollary to that, we don't want to ask for help.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a joke. You know, we don't pray enough. We don't ask for help. We don't let ourselves be carried, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah. I mean, back of so many of these fears is the demand. I think
so.
That's the case.
I never really realized that until Jan Rigsby really helped me see that about my fear. You know, because I was sort of in, you know, a justified space. Well, of course I shouldn't, have to lose a child. I mean, that's an unnatural, you know, order, if you will, and it's devastating. I mean, I unfortunately know plenty of women and men who have lost children. It's a devastating. That's a hard thing. That's a hard thing. And most people I know who've lost a child, they don't get over it. It's not an easy one, but it does happen. And what,
Even losing a baby that people don't talk about.
yeah, and the idea that it, you know, that no, you know, it can't happen to me, or that it should never happen. Well,
Right.
it might, you know, it might. Still, it might. I mean, just because it didn't
You
happen
don't know.
3, you know, I mean, it,
You never know.
and you never know. And then
Some people
You know,
just seem to live in
I'm
the
thinking about that demand, the demand that we have, that this shouldn't happen to us.
Right.
That's to me like the 4-year-old. I think of myself when I was 3 and 4. I was pretty demanding kid, even though I was not treated well and all of that. But that 4-year-old in us, it stays in us, that says, I want it my way. You know, the kid, you can really see it. You can see it in the child. No, I'm not going to do that, Mom. I'm not doing it, you know, whatever.
I want a popsicle before dinner, not afterward.
Right. And I want it now. And that stays with us. I was just getting in touch with that recently. That, you know, I always saw myself as the abused child and all that, but there was a kid under there that was quite demanding and probably difficult. I never like to look at that when I'm looking back.
Well, the adult ego is also pretty demanding.
I'm sorry.
The adult ego is pretty demanding.
Well, that's what I'm trying to say. That child doesn't go away. That's my point, Alan.
No.
That child is there. Even I'll address it to you, Beverly. That I don't know whether you would feel it or not, but I got in touch with it in the past couple of weeks. That child is still there saying, I don't like this happening to me. This should not happen to me. I should not have to feel pain. Just like we've been talking about. So I don't know whether you are in touch with that side of it.
No, it makes sense. It makes sense.
Yeah.
A lot of demand. Like my mother's 100 years old, and kind of my ego is saying, why are you weak and frail? I don't like that. What's wrong?
Yeah.
You shouldn't be that way.
I hear you. I hear it.
You're lost.
Yeah,
I'm beginning
that's right.
to
That's
hear
how you
that.
want to feel, I suppose. Hey, Taria, can I put you on the spot
Okay.
about fear?
Let her sit in that chair. Good. That's the hot spot.
Is it red for a reason?
Yeah.
Yeah. Hello, everybody.
No, it's
Hey.
good to see you.
Hi.
Same here. When Tracy was talking, it reminded me that I had something like that going on like 20 years ago. And that was when my daughter was going to college. And she was going to college in Boston. And she was always working besides doing that. And she took and she was working, she took a job in a nightclub. So she was working every night at a nightclub. And those days, not everyone or nobody, I don't think, had a cell phones and anything. And I was every night, there were many nights I didn't sleep at all because I didn't know if she was, what happened. Was she okay? She said she was always taking a taxi home, but I don't know if that was true or not because she worked till 4 a.m. or something. So these were very difficult times for me. But not only that, during that time, before she went there to work there, I felt that I needed to live alone. My husband had passed maybe 5 years prior to that, and I wanted to date again. So I didn't want to, I live in a one apartment house. So I didn't want to her to stay there with me because then that would not have been good for, you know, if someone that I like would wanted to spend some time with me. So not only was I afraid for her, I also felt that if she would die, it would be my fault. And that, you know, I didn't realize it then, but that's how it came. It was because I did something wrong. That's why she would die. But I mean, luckily she didn't work there that long, maybe half a year. So then I was able to let that go. But that was one of my big fears. And nowadays, I think that a big fear for me is that I'm afraid that I am not accepted the way I am because I always see myself a little different. I'm not outgoing enough. I don't talk too much. I'm not American, really. I see more like if I would be my own people, so to speak. So I feel when I go someplace where I don't know that many people, I feel, oh, they're not going to like me because I'm different. So I have that I'm different feeling a lot. And I'm like trying to work over it, but there is still little some of that stay with me all the time, I think. So that's the big fear.
You think you're different because you don't, because you're not an American? Is that why you think you're different?
I think I'm not like a typical American. What I see, like people I hear, they laugh a lot, they joke quiet, a lot. Yeah. I'm quiet, I'm different. And I think that it has something to do with my nationality, I guess. So I don't know.
It's interesting, isn't it, how every one of us has different fears?
Right.
You know, I didn't know there were so many fears.
Yeah.
Oh, that's a joke.
Now we're gonna have to
You're
look
joking.
more out.
There's a few more people we haven't asked, including you.
Okay, can I go?
Thank you. Thank you.
Guitar, yes.
Not yet, and neither did
Kevin. No, Kevin, did you talk about?
Kevin and Patricia didn't.
Yes, that's right.
And I don't think Marion did either.
Well, you know, I guess you're under the gun now,
One of
or
the
something.
Who?
You want to share more about your fears, Marion?
Oh, me, Marion? Oh, I guess I feel so vulnerable, and my fears. Many, many years ago, I think it was with a reading with Emmanuel, you know, who Pat Rodegast, you know, channeled. I think with the reading, like that I was just sort of in this life, not governed. What's another word for governed? Just kind of taken over, whatever, by fear. That seemed what?
Possessed?
Control.
Well, not possessed, like dominated, you know, by fear. That seemed to be, and that was many, many, many years ago. And so I'm very keen about, you know, looking at that because I'm so grateful that I have ways, you know, to process these fears. My main fear, I think now is, always has been, but it's right in my face, and that is being alone. Alone, then being alone, it has like, you know, a lot of little equal signs. Being alone equals not being loved, equals nobody cares, equals, it could go on and on, you know, the equal signs of what that means. And so then it's mainly around those that I'm closest to. I have 2 children and 4 grandsons, and it's mainly around them. Now, 2 live near me. My son lives in another state and 2 grandsons are there. So I haven't seen them for quite a while with COVID and all. But the 2 here, one goes away to college often, but even when here, they don't reach out to me like they did, because I used to take care of them as little boys from pre-K through middle school. 3 days a week, I took care of these 2 boys. And so now I hardly ever see them. They don't reach out to me. So I find it's just what's in the lecture that when not acknowledged, and I do acknowledge everything, it's just that obviously I unfold, I don't get everything all in one fell swoop, is that what comes up is my hatred, anger, revenge, spite, all of that comes up when I take the lid off. And I'm grateful for being able to do the core work, because I've learned, when I go into that, I learn to express it here, and always turn it over to my higher power, always turn it over to God, and always state that this is triggered by them, that they don't cause it. But in the emotion side of me, they're causing it. I am their victim. I am the result of all their neglect of me. And then on the other side of the coin, which is in this lecture, 2 sides of everything, is the hatred, anger, spite, revenge. And so I move around with that with no conclusion, because intellectually I can figure things out and I'm smart that way, but not with this, because I sense what I went through with my parents who've been long gone. I had the experience of total release of them, where there's no more, for those 2 souls on the human level, there's no more karmic paybacks, anything. On a soul level, we're always one. I sense that I'm being taken to this territory with these deep karmic connections, children and grandchildren. And so I realize I can't just analyze and jump ahead. It's stepping now into allowing insights, allowing more. But I like this lecture speaks so much to the 2 sides of the coin, and about, I know that I am in that lecture, reason, will, and emotion, which I don't think we've ever done all together. My personality type will be different than somebody else's. My main defenses are different than others. Mine is to be submissive, be the good girl, good grandmother, good mother, all that. And so a couple of years ago, it's probably about 3 years ago, I declared that that was over, because I got the insights. It would be authenticity. And I would no longer do that, because underneath that mask is a lot of negativity and demands. So I'm still in the process of that mask dissolving, and feeling the alone and lonely, and that nobody loves me and nobody cares about me. And growing up, I was youngest of 4, coming out of the Depression, and I really had to figure out a lot of things myself. Hardworking parents, and so even though I have a lot of grounding in my early childhood and what needs were not met there will still be something coming up. Like just a few weeks ago, it wasn't new information, but it was a different level of like being with it, that my mother never looked at me and said, I don't think my father either, I love you, you're so beautiful, so grateful, you're my daughter, never anything like that. These were hardworking Midwesterners, Protestants that didn't do those kinds of things. And so it still comes up, And I thought, oh, and I have little aha moments. Oh, okay. And so then I tend to isolate, because to try to reach out and have more community and more connection, then that I lose the parents of my childhood. So I've got all that going on, and I deal with it, I work in it. And then every once in a while, there's a shift where it always comes from the right side. Then there's a shift of knowing, and of something, a message that I get, and I'm so grateful. I'm so grateful. It might be play some music. I play the harmonica and the recorder, and I never want to do those things, because I don't want to break the spell. Part of me just wants to stay feeling miserable, and then I'll play some music. And I say, okay. And I feel like I'm the grouchy kid talking to my master God and saying, all right, it's guidance, I'll go do it. And then when I'm doing it, I'm in the moment. I'm in the moment. So it's kind of back and forth, listening to guidance, doing my spiritual practice. Grateful for my core energetic training because I can kill everybody off when I turn it over to my God self, my personal God, and say, I am now going to release what's stored in my energy system that was triggered by these children and grandchildren. And then some, I don't know, it feels like a miracle turns up. So it's kind of back and forth, back and forth. But it's what the guide says. When it's in this lecture, but there are other lectures also, we're here to hold both sides of the coin equally. And that is the gateway to the unitive state. And I find that it's very rapid now. I can be having a wonderful moment in the park with the trees and the birds and feel so happy with the flowers. And I can feel that little glimmer of pain inside of me. It's not very much, but I can feel it. And it's sort of like, okay, hello, hi, pain, let me keep appreciating these birds and flowers and sky. So that's it. But it's that aloneness, And that there's no God, when I'm in that, there's no God. It's just me, me floundering around.
Does the pain become soft? The guy talks about after you feel the anger, then you feel a healing pain.
Well, what I have and what I call it my toolbox. I have my daily to-do list that I make, and across the top is a string of things like meditation. I do this exercise called the nitric oxide dump. I do instant impact breathing, which is, my teacher said it'll bring anxiety down. Just do 4 a day. So I have a whole string of things across the top that are my toolbox, that if I don't do them, I'm not hard on myself. I start over the next day. So when I'm going down the street, I look at flowers and count to 17 because it reprograms my brain from the fight or flight amygdala up into the cerebral cortex. So it's delightful walking down, looking at the flowers. I count to 17, then I go on and I do it again. And of course, my meditation and prayer time. And it's having all these tools in the toolbox and doing my breathing. So I just stop along the sidewalk and I do my instant impact breathing. And then that seems to bring me into more of the now and out of that extreme of, and also mind chatter. So I have a mantra that I say, it's the name of God. And because I'll notice I'm either in the future with a conversation of somebody I'm going to meet practicing, or I'm in the past redoing the conversation I just had with somebody. And then it comes in my right temple, stop. And I'll hear, go over there by the tree. I'll be walking up Columbus Avenue or something. And I stop and then look and I name things: tree, bird, sky. And I breathe and it breaks that vicious circle. It breaks the vicious circle. So I do that throughout my day. And then there's fun things I have and people that I do see. But the demand is there. People I see that they take care of me in some way. Then I have to go home and be alone again. Then I complain again. So it keeps going on and on. But I do some, I have some things to smile about, and especially nature.
Well, it does seem like you're kind of dissolving your anger. The guide says, if you let yourself feel it and follow it through to the pain, it will dissolve, it will liberate you.
Yeah. Oh, that's why I'm so grateful for all the psychodrama I've done, all of the core work that I've done, because I can just kill off everybody with no guilt. Because as the guide said in some lecture, we all know it, it's in every lecture, is that we don't dissolve these images except it's a metaphor, the hand of God. It's impossible. Otherwise, it gets destructive.
Right.
It gets destructive or it implodes. And when I can look at a picture of my master and say, this is what I'm doing now. I'm releasing what is stored in my cellular memory, triggered by so-and-so, and then let it rip. and then grounded. And at the end of it, I'm smiling as I'm letting all that energy flow through my energy field in my body. I end up smiling and walking away and okay, on to something else. So it's gratitude. I find gratitude is the foundation of life. Gratitude. Yeah. So grateful for all these tools that I have. It's beyond words, my gratitude. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I want to come over there and I want to sleep overnight on Joel and Tracy's couch. And I want to just see. And with Ellie. So there's kind of an, I don't know, I have all these tools. Yes, I go through it. Yes, I've had altered state experiences, this one with letting my parents go. I know I'm being led through this with my children and grandchildren, because what I experienced with my parents was an unconditional love that I've never known before. And it was not in this sphere, it was in an altered state, and a total letting go and release of those two souls. And it was with such love, I thought, okay, I talked to my God self, I'm willing to go through this because letting go of all these attachments, what I think are these sources, and they aren't my source, but I make others into my source, as I'm a more submissive type, so I make others into my source and then I hate them, is that the road takes me to unconditional love, and I can't try for that. I can't think that out. It can only be a shift when I'm ready. So thank you. And thank you for all for being there. I just, I see your hearts, and that's what really touches me so much, your hearts. Yeah.
Thanks, Marion. I love you.
I love you too, Alan. I love
I've
you.
known Marion for, what, 50 years now? For crying out loud?
I think you were,
1973?
I think you were 19. When were you 19? I
I was
don't know.
19 in 1975.
Over 40 years.
Somewhere around there. I mean, I met you early on. We used to, what, with that wheelbarrow, take things up to the garden and the compost and stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In August, Alan.
Mhm.
And sometimes I just get tired of being here. I just get tired of being Marion sometimes. It's like, so I just talked to God. I said, come on already. Enough already. Really, really, enough. I've done
That's
enough.
what my mom said. She says, why am I still alive?
Yeah. Come on.
What's going on here?
I want to mention that Nancy Witherell would have loved to be here tonight, but she was in the hospital.
Oh, what happened?
She had two little incidents. They found a little cancer in her colon when they did a colonoscopy, and it was malignant. But that was the second time. But then they took that out, and she went home. She's at NYU Langone, good hospital. But she didn't eat right. She told me only yesterday that she didn't really eat right when she wound up back in the hospital.
Oh.
But, different things happen. But now she's probably home today, or she'll be home this weekend. But she said, you can tell people. So she gave me that permission, and she really wanted to be here.
Well, I will send her this video.
Nice. That's very nice.
The video of our discussion tonight.
Okay.
And hopefully she'll feel included.
Yeah.
And if she wants to,
Good.
talk about her own experiences, maybe she can the next meeting that we have. Anyone else want to share about their fears or anger or any of these things?
I just want to say that when I read the lecture, I was surprised that what came up for me, I've been dealing with emotions because I'm regularly meditating in a group every day. So the emotions are coming up, and that was good. So I'm reading this and I'm saying, well, I'm getting in touch with the emotions. They're coming up, a lot of sobbing going on. But then I said, but wait a minute. I had real fear of being hurt. In other words, when I was reading the lecture, I was thinking emotional fear, But then I said, wait a minute, you're not in touch with the fear of being attacked, let's say, which and that I was going to be at least hurt, if not killed. I never really faced that. I didn't look at that. And I just would ask here, I definitely want to look at it, but I have no idea how to do it. You know, it's not something that I remember specifically. I know it happened. I don't have any incident to bring it up, but I'll just say that I want to face that terror. It's terror. It's not even fear. It's terror of being assaulted and perhaps being killed. I think as a child, you just always think you're going to die. I guess I don't even know that.
Assaulted on the street? Does she mean assaulted on the street?
Tracy says, do you mean assaulted on the street? Like,
I mean assaulted in my own home. No, I mean
Assaulted in
assaulted.
your own home?
Yeah.
You mean now or when you were a child?
No, when I was a child.
Yeah.
Yeah, no. My mother was a little off the wall. The little, you can take the little out, but I like to put it in to make it look good. She had, serious problems. And sometimes I think she was psychotic. And I'll just tell you quickly, just to say, I don't like to go into it too much, but at one point, my brother and I, and probably the little one, my other brother was probably there too, were hiding behind the couch because my mother is off the wall and God knows what she's going to do. And my sister, the older one, she was like 14 at the time. She said, "Oh my God, Mom is crazy." And I said, I felt so good to hear that.
Yeah.
Mom is crazy. Oh God, that was such reality for me.
Yep.
And now here we are hiding behind the couch, get terrified. So yeah, that was a hard time when I was growing up. But I never thought about facing my family being physically not abusive. They were too, but it's the craziness that they were crazy.
Get out of this.
Out of control.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is Marion. I have the original version of the lecture, so I'm not sure which page it's on. I guess it's 5, where it starts, let us look into the specific feelings now. And the guide speaks about when fear becomes exaggerated, fear turns into terror. And that's a very important aspect of this, because terror, with my clients and with myself, but I always did that when I worked with, when I'd have a client, a worker, is that terror, I distinguish between, because there's fear. You do anything new, you're going to have a little fear. If you do something, a bigger step, you're going to have maybe a lot of fear. But terror has a different aspect in that it awakens that fear of annihilation that children feel before they're able to reason out anything. It's the fear of annihilation, not just the fear of something bad happening. And it's that they would not exist. And as the guide said, that is the worst fear we can have, because we are spirit and we are eternal. And to have little children, and we carry this in us, to have that terror, the fear that they will not exist, is the worst fear one can have. So when it gets exaggerated, it's terror. And I think that's a very important point to make, because that little girl would feel terror. And some of it was assuaged by what your older sister said. But there is a fear of annihilation in all that. And that exists, even as adults, we have that. I have that still. I can feel when I'm terrified of something. And then I can say, oh, I need more connection with spirit. Well, how can I do that? Who can I be with? Things like that. I'll have questions about how to fulfill my needs that I have when I feel that terror.
Thank you, Marianne. That annihilation, I'll work with that, because that's exactly it.
Yeah,
Exactly.
Fear you will not exist. Yes, worst fear you can have.
I mean,
you want to ask something, Joel?
yeah. So we have different theories about death, right? About what happens, right?
Well, no. There's what the guide says.
What's that?
I mean, the guide says that when we die, there's a period at which, depending on how attached we are to our life circumstances, some people don't want to believe that they're dead. They stick around. Then there are spirits that kind of encourage them to disassociate themselves from the material world and become in the company of, in the own sphere where they inhabit. And then they reevaluate their life, and they look about whether they accomplished their task, and then whether it's time when it will be time to reincarnate again to accomplish another task.
Okay. Now, okay, but outside of the
In a
path work,
nutshell.
outside of the path work, so I have a friend who is what is that group out in the Midwest? Maharishi, Mahesh Maharishi, the TM, right? Is everybody?
Transcendental
Yeah,
meditation.
gentleman?
meditation, right.
Okay. So he, so
Transcendental.
my friend tells me that according to the yogi, that when we go to the other side, we become part of the whole, right? And that we don't have any we're no longer identifiable as who we are, right? So let's say there's this ocean of consciousness, and we're an individuated form of that consciousness. Now we go back. So this is just one theory, right? And we're no longer identifiable. You know, who knows what our name is on the other side? I mean, Joel, somebody gave me that name, right? I presume that when I go to the other side, whatever my name really is not Joel. And it's like, so what? You know, right? Somebody gave me that. I've attached to that. I have meaning associated with that. Who gives a darn, right? Once I'm dead, and everybody that I know is dead, I don't exist here anymore anyway, right? But let's say I'm on the other side and I merge back in with the ocean, and there's anything identifiable about me, right? So what? What difference does it make? I'm not going to know, right? I'm going to be part of the ocean of everything, of God. I'm going to be completely content, and I'm going to be completely at peace with creating whatever it is God does. Or let's say what is it you call it? The not the agnostics, the atheists who said there's nothing, right? You die, you're dead, it's over, right? Again, so what? I don't
Not true, not true, not true.
No, okay, but let's say it is true. Am I going to know?
Well,
Am I going to know that I've died and I don't exist anymore?
that's the same argument Socrates makes in the Apology, you know, about the nature of death. That either it's something which may not be so bad, or it's nothing, in which case it'll be like the deepest sleep you ever had.
Exactly. So what is there to fear? What's
Well,
the
that's
fear of
what
annihilation?
That's why
It's
Socrates.
the ego, right?
That's why
Yeah.
Socrates made the offering to Asclepius when he took the hemlock. Asclepius being the god of health, medicine, because he
Yeah.
felt that drinking the hemlock was something that would help him regain his health. Dying, in other words, would be a step toward greater health for a philosopher.
I think it's going to be a big job.
Well,
But anyway,
if you're going, first of all, there's various planes in the other side. Everything is an illusion. Even creation is an illusion. However, we're here to live in it, and we're here to contribute to something that is beyond even our imagination by being in creation. Yes, on a spirit level, I don't know what your path is, Joel. I don't know what anybody else's path is. I don't know what mine is. Which sphere, which plane of consciousness I'm going into. Am I merging, God realized, in with the ocean? Well, then I'm the everything and the nothing. That, you know, there's,
Right.
it's
right.
the everything and the nothing.
Exactly.
So
That's what I was wanting to-
that's
yeah.
different than when a child has a fear of annihilation, that I don't exist, because in that everything and nothing, it means there is nothing to die and there is nothing
Right.
to live.
Right.
It just is. It just is. So it depends on each person's journey. What plane am I going into? A subtle plane that where I do come back and incarnate again, or am I merging in the ocean and being God realized? You know, I don't know. Yeah.
Right.
So
Right. I
Marion,
wanted to add something to Joel's as well, right in line with what Marion said. It was resonating with me before you even said it, Marion, about the everything and the nothing. And it's really what helped cement it for me, Joel, was that I could recognize through being aware of being aware, okay, of just taking a moment and checking in with awareness, and the fact that I've never not been able to ever not check in with my own awareness. I've always existed. My awareness has always been capable of checking in with my own awareness. Okay, what would not being able to check in with awareness ever feel like? Have you ever experienced that? No. You've never experienced not being, okay, or not being aware. It's always been there, no matter what you call yourself, Joel, Kevin, you know, Marion, whoever we all are, okay? We know one thing. And that's that we can check in with our awareness always, and that you could call a spark of life, right? That you could call the essence of a, at the deepest level, the essence of what you are subjectively, your subjective experience. But the fear of annihilation for me, if I just put it in my experience of it through my life, has been predominantly when I associated myself, or I catch myself associating myself still with things, okay, with a body, or with a person, or persona, or a family, or a nation, or whatever, a religion. It could go on and on forever, right? There are so many things that, and idols you could call them, right? But there are so many items, even images, right? There are things that we relate ourselves to and think that's me, right? And we get caught in that. Of course, it's so easy because we're born and we're told immediately, what we are and how we fit in and what we're supposed to do and the whole bit too. So there came a point for me when I was kind of, I guess, terrified of what's coming in the afterlife too, or whatever, or trying to figure it out. It's like the one thing that always grounds me when I'm terrified, and I mean pure terror, like you guys are saying, when you're in that pure terror state, you can really snap if you find the right moment to just kind of recenter. Some people call it the grounding, right? You could do it obviously in the earth and in the body and things like that. But it's like something shifts, right, in you, and you can just sense, well, wait a second, what the hell am I so crazy about right now, right? Can't you sense there's something about you that has never changed? It's been eternal. It's never shifted outside of this. You've lost sight of that right now, and you're freaking out about something that really doesn't affect your eternity or your truest nature, the core, the most core nature of you, right? And that's kind of what I think helped me recognize that when I equate myself with a thing, even a soul is a thing in our way. Even a group soul that goes to a next plane is a thing. Even the Buddhist, whatever that they have in some of the Theravada Buddha with all the different planes and this and that, those are things. They're all part of the illusion. So what ultimately is true is no matter what part of me I call myself in this river, this energy that's moving in this ocean that you once described, whatever current is Kevin, or whatever current Kevin today becomes tomorrow, whatever his name is, or even if he splits or whatever the hell happens, who knows? But whatever it is, what I can always do is check in with my subjective awareness and recognize that I am not a thing. Okay, a thing can be perceived in the all one, in the full, in the Tao, and whatever you want to call the largest thing, right? And not even thing, the largest. So I guess what I'm coming to is that when we say God exists, it's not exactly 100% true, because to exist, you have to be inside of, you have to be a thing to exist. You have to have you have to be able to be observed to exist in a sense, because it's an objective form. But God is, because all things are in that, or of that, or arise within that, or are experienced through that. So if you can sense in any moment that there's an aspect of you that never changes, that's God to me, at least in how I've related to God. That's the closest that I can experience that feeling, because it's never gone away. It's never not been there, right? Does that make sense?
Yep.
Does.
I was a little bit on a crazy train of thought
That
there,
Oh,
but
thank you,
was a good
Ken.
rant. Yeah, it really was. I like that. That was far out.
and without marijuana. Okay? No.
Yeah, that we're raising consciousness here, and it's a great thing, right? That's what the pathwork is about.
Yes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So shall we have our 10 minutes of meditation, friends? Lights.
Can I make a request? Can you hold in your hearts my sister who's diagnosed with kidney cancer, and she's
Yes.
undergoing a resection of the cancer, removal of the kidney and whatnot, on her right side on Monday. So
What is her first name?
Karen. Her
Karen,
name is
yes.
Karen and last name Horner, but yeah, just
Okay.
Karen. I'm sure
Yes,
she'll
yes.
be identified.
Definitely, definitely. Yes.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, friends. Well, let's hold her in our hearts and also think about our fears and what's underneath them, and our consciousness and where we are in our conscious thinking. How
Did you
we,
set your timer?
I did, yeah. Yeah, and what our anxieties are and what's underneath them. Thank you. Sorry that was a phone call. We have 2 more minutes to meditate. Thank you. Thank you, friends.
Thank you, Alan.
Thank you very
And-
much.
And Tracy.
Thank you so much. Yes, it was wonderful
Yeah.
to see everyone.
Yes.
Very good to see you. Haven't seen you in a long time.
Good seeing you, Kevin, even though we don't really recognize you anymore.
Yeah, I like it. I think it looks really good.
I do
Oh, you
too. I
sweetheart.
like it. I like it.
You'll
Oh,
see me in
Sure.
person soon enough. I'm
I like it.
vaccinated, so
Okay, excellent.
and think,
hopefully I'll try next month to be in with you, Alan. And
Whatever
All
works
right.
for you.
God bless everyone.
Okay.
thank you, Alan, for
Good night,
keeping us on
everyone.
course,
Good
and
night,
Tracy,
Beverly.
and
Great
you,
to
and
see
both of you
everybody.
choosing the lectures, you and Tracy. Thank you so much. And in honor of all of you, Tracy and Joel too, I'm going to go have a snack.
Yeah.
Another snack. You've been eating all night, Marion. But you look great. So good to see you back and
I
smile.
miss your snack, so I'm going to go have a snack.
We're here waiting for you.
Okay, God bless. Good night, everyone.
Good night, Joel.
Good night. Good
Good night,
night.
everybody.
Right.
Love you.
Night,
Thank you all.